What happens if you build a house on sand? And what happens if you build it on rock? Well, Jesus Christ tells us about two men. One built a house on rock and the other on sand. And the winds and the storms came, and the house built on rock was, to beat a metaphor to death, safe as houses. It stood there, solid as the rock it was built on. The house built on sand? Not so much. Of course, Jesus wasn't just hanging about with his buddies, telling a funny story from the days as a carpenter. No, he was using a fictional story to impart an important spiritual truth. He was telling a parable. And what was the lesson of that parable? That without a firm foundation, nothing, nada, not a house, not a religion, can stand. The church is the house built on the rock. In the scriptures, Christ makes it clear. He is the cornerstone, Peter is the rock, and the apostles are the foundation stones of the heavenly Jerusalem. The houses built on sand are heresies, and the sand is the pride and hubris of men. There are many heresies established by men who think they know better than Christ. There is only one house built on the rock, and that is the Catholic Church. But although the church was established on a firm foundation by Christ and can never fail or falter, it doesn't mean that she wasn't ever under attack from people who thought they could tear her down. For the first 300 years of her existence, the church was persecuted. The pagan Roman Empire was the dominant power in the Mediterranean world. It was opposed to Catholicism and wanted to see the church destroyed. But two important events changed Christianity's status. In 311, the Edict of Toleration ended the persecution, and in 313 AD, the Edict of Milan made Christianity legal. The Edict of Milan was issued by the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. He had become a Christian, or at least sympathetic to Christianity, a few years before, influenced strongly by his mother Helena. She found the true cross and many other relics of Christ's life, passion, and death. But her most enduring legacy was the faith she gave to her son. The turning point for Constantine's Christianity came in 312, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, a pivotal event in the struggle to become emperor. He saw a vision in the sky of Greek words reading, "In this sign, conquer." He ordered his troops to adorn their shields with the Chi-Rho, a Christian symbol made of the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek. Of course, because we are the Roman Catholic Church, and it was the Roman Empire, and we're all about the Latin here, Constantine's vision came down to us in Latin. In hoc signu vinces. But you will still see the Chi-Rho in many places even today. Constantine said he owed his victory to the one true God, the God of the Christians. And over the next 2 decades, he supported the church. Not only did he end the persecution, but he also used Christian art and architecture for his new capital of Constantinople in modern-day Turkey, discouraged the worship of pagan gods, banned crucifixion, and even declared Sunday the Lord's Day, the day of rest throughout the empire. I've been using words like Catholic, Christian, and even church pretty much interchangeably, and there's a reason for that. At this point in history, there were no Christians who weren't Catholic. No Protestants, no Orthodox, no Coptics, no little groups reading the Bible and deciding their own way. At this point in history, the canon of the Bible was only just getting finalized. And Christian meant the church, and the church meant Catholic, and Catholic meant Christian. But that didn't mean there was always agreement and peace. For the first 3 centuries, the church was an underground religion, contrary to the state cult of pagan Rome. That made it very difficult for believers to live their lives. Thousands were killed, thrown to the lions in the arena, crucified, tortured to death for refusing to give up the faith. But it also made it difficult for bishops to talk about the nitty-gritty details of the faith. It's hard to have a serious theological discussion if at any moment the door could get kicked in by a size 15 Caligay, the Roman legions march in and cart you and your buddies off to be cat food. That changed with the Edict of Milan and Constantine's patronage of Christianity. Suddenly, bishops could sit down and chat without risking being killed. Public debates could be held. Copies of the scriptures and commentaries on them could be exchanged and shared without them or Christians being burned. And so the church started to have serious discussion. Now, don't think for a second that the discussions these 4th century bishops were having were anything like the discussions happening today in the church. They were talking about heady, difficult theological concepts, the nature of God, the identity of Christ, the hypostatic union, homeoousis, and other words that are really hard to pronounce. They weren't talking about morality. They had a solid grasp on what was right, what was wrong, what was sinful, and what was virtuous. Really, when you think about it, this makes all kinds of sense. While Christian morality was radically different from pagan morality when it came onto the scene in the 1st century, it's cohesive and easy to understand. Treat people with respect, show genuine love and charity, sacrifice for others, avoid selfishness, and attachment to the world. It's not always easy to follow, but it's pretty easy to understand. The same can't be said about the Trinity and God's relationship to himself. Both pagans and Jews can understand God the Father, omnipotent, eternal, immortal, the original uncaused cause. But Christ, the Son of God, who is God, begotten of the Father, yet eternal like him, not created, but the Creator, and he became human like us, yet he's still God. How can the Creator be a creature? If anyone tells you they fully grasp the Trinity and Christ's incarnation, one of 3 things is happening. They're lying, they're trying to sell you something, or they're just confused. The nature of God is a great mystery which we will never fully understand. Of course, it doesn't mean some understanding is impossible. Many great saints have helped us grasp this mystery, revealing a detailed and precise theology of the Trinity and the Incarnation. And the first bits of that theology came out in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Constantine had been emperor and a Christian for about 20 years by this point, and his empire and church were riven by a great debate. Was Jesus divine, that is God, or not? Was he the creator of the universe, or was he a creature? Was he eternal, or was there a period when he did not exist? This was the first of the great heresies, the false claim that Jesus was not God. Today, we call it Arianism, named after the priest Arius. It was Arius who openly challenged the bishop of Alexandria, St. Alexander. Arius said Christ wasn't divine, that he had a beginning, was merely the first and most perfect of God's creatures, but was only made God by the power of the Father. Alexander held the authentic Trinitarian position, however, that Christ is God, co-eternal with the Father, for how else could he be the Father's Son? Despite the fact that Arius' views were condemned by a local synod in 321 AD, his views continued to spread, thanks to support from Bishop Eusebius of Nicomedia and his followers' influence over the schools in Alexandria. These were seats of great learning, like universities or seminaries today, and it made it easy for his false teaching to reach every corner of the empire. By 325, the controversy was so serious, Constantine stepped in. He called the First Ecumenical Council, a gathering of the whole church, whose decisions would be binding on all Christians. Discussions raged back and forth, and the debate became heated. St. Nicholas, the bishop of Myra, actually punched Arius because he was so angry at what he was saying about Jesus Christ. Eventually, the truth prevailed, and the language we are familiar with in the Nicene Creed today, consubstantial, that is, of the same substance, with the Father, was adopted. The decree was passed to the whole church. It was the doctrine of faith that Christ was indeed divine, God, eternal, of the same substance as the Father. Arius and some of his most pernicious followers were exiled, and later on, bishops who did not fully support the council's declaration shared their fate. Now, you might think that would be the end of it. After all, the church has spoken. The case is closed, right? But heresy does not die so easily. Arianism continued to be promoted and discussed often through the use of clever language, misleading statements, and even outright lies. Constantine wanted peace almost at any price, so he became lenient towards Arians, letting them return from exile. He questioned Arius, asking him point blank if you were Catholic. Arius responded that he was. But according to St. Athanasius, he did so by making a dishonest use of the language of Holy Scripture and hiding the real reason for his condemnation years before. Constantine believed him and told the bishop of Constantinople to let the heretic back into the church. The emperor might not have been totally fooled, however. He warned Arius that if he had lied, heaven would judge him. And that's exactly what happened. The bishop of Constantinople didn't believe Arius and prayed the following prayer. If Arius is to be joined to the church tomorrow, let me thy servant depart, and do not destroy the pious with the impious. If thou wilt spare thy church, and I know thou dost spare her, give not over thy heritage to destruction and to shame. Remove Arius, lest if he come into the church, heresies seem to come in with him, and impiety be hereafter deemed piety. His prayer was answered in a somewhat spectacular way. He went down like this. So he's like walking around, and then, actually, you know what? I'm just going to let Socrates of Constantinople explain what happened.
It was then Saturday, and Arius was expecting to assemble with the church on the day following, but divine retribution overtook his daring criminalities. For going out of the imperial palace, he paraded proudly through the midst of the city, attracting the notice of all the people. As he approached the place called Constantine's Forum, a terror arising from the remorse of conscience seized Arius, and with the terror of violent relaxation of the bowels. He therefore inquired whether there was a convenient place near, and, being directed to the back of Constantine's Forum, he hastened thither. Soon after, a faintness came over him, and together with the evacuations his bowels protruded, followed by a copious hemorrhage and the descent of the smaller intestines. Moreover, portions of his spleen and liver were brought off in the effusion of blood, so that he almost immediately died.
Wow. This, of course, unsurprisingly, was seen as divine retribution against Arius and his beliefs. Even so, the heresy continued. Arius died in 339 AD, but the heresy did not die with him. It continued despite the declaration of the Council of Nicaea. Why? Well, it was popular among the elites. Constantine himself was baptized by a bishop sympathetic to the Arian heresy. There was a great deal of political maneuvering, behind-the-scenes machinations and deals, parties and factions within the church and the empire. It took over 50 years, including the exile and restoration of Athanasius and the rise and fall of an apostate emperor, before the Arian heresy was finally laid to rest in 381 AD at the Council of Constantinople. Well, perhaps. It is true there are very few Arians today. There is a small sect in England who call themselves an Arian church and actually canonized the guy recently, apparently. And Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons have similarities to the Arian theology, but generally speaking, most Christians today believe Jesus Christ is God, eternal, divine, of the same substance as the Father. At least that's what they say. A lot of so-called Christians today, and that includes Catholics, give lip service to Christ's divinity, but don't act like they believe it. Well, you know what? They'll sing the hymns, and they'll say the creed, and I'm sure if you hook them up to a lie detector and ask them, they'd say it and believe it. But they don't act like it. You know people like this. Maybe they're your friends and family. Heck, maybe it's even you. People who read what Christ said, what Christ teaches in his words and through his church, and then you say, well, that was then and this is now, or, well, I don't have to agree with everything he says. Or, you know what? Yeah, you do. If he's God, you do. If Christ is God, then we have to listen to him. He's not a man giving advice. He's not a clever guy making a good argument. He wasn't just a wise teacher. He's the creator of the universe, dropping some bombs of straight truth right into your head bone. Formal Arianism really doesn't exist anymore, but the disease has mutated into a new form, a hidden denial of his divinity, a practical rejection of Christ as God. We can say Christ is God all we like, but if we don't listen to him, if we actively correct and change what he taught because we think we know better, are we actually treating him like God? We think we know better. That's going to be a common theme in this series, because that's how these heresies start and spread. And yes, Arius and his followers got a pass from the emperor because he wanted peace and for everyone to get along. Perhaps a warning for us today. And yes, political ambition and factualism in the church got him support. Again, something that happens all too often today. But the seeds of his heresy, as of all heresies, is pride. It is having too much faith in your own intellect and not enough humility to accept the teachings of the church, even if you don't understand it. The Arians, Arius, those who came before him, those who came after him, and even his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren today reject the mysteries of the faith because they don't understand them. Instead, they come up with their own ideas. Very few of us who claim to be Christian are going to go out and explicitly deny the divinity of Christ. At least I hope so. But how many of us will give way to prideful reliance on our own intellect over the mind of the church and act as if Christ and his bride, the Holy Catholic Church, are not divine? Well, that's all for this time. Join us next week when we'll be talking about Pelagius and Pelagianism, which says we can get to heaven on our own. And that is a very common heresy today indeed. I'm Charles Hornbacher, and this has been Houses Built on Sand.